Something was wrong. A mother vanished. Her car abandoned. Her phone, still inside. The police called it a kidnapping. The media spread fear across America. But days later, the truth shocked everyone. Because this wasn't a crime. It was a lie. And not just any lie. A carefully planned disappearance that fooled an entire town. This is the story of Quinn Hanna Gray. And the kidnapping that never happened. It was a quiet morning in late 2009, in a peaceful suburban neighborhood in the United States. The kind of place where nothing ever really happens. Neighbors wave at each other. Kids ride bikes freely. Doors are sometimes left unlocked. That morning, Quinn Hanna Gray left her house like any other day. She was a housewife, a mother, known in her community as friendly, polite, and completely ordinary. But by afternoon, she was gone. Her husband was the first to notice something was wrong. Quinn hadn't answered her phone. That alone wasn't unusual, but hours passed and there was still no word. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Her car was found abandoned. Not parked neatly. Not safely left somewhere. Looked wrong? The driver's door was slightly open. Her belongings were still inside. Her phone. Her purse. Everything. Except her. Police were called immediately. Within minutes, the quiet neighborhood turned into a crime scene. Officers blocked the area. Neighbors gathered outside. Rumors spread fast. Kidnapping. That was the word everyone feared. And now, it seemed real. Investigators looked at the scene carefully. There were no clear signs of struggle. No broken glass. No obvious evidence of violence. But something didn't feel right. Why would someone leave everything behind? Why would a mother just disappear in the middle of the day? The media picked up the story quickly. Local mother missing. Possible abduction in suburban area. Fear spread across the community. Parents held their children closer. Doors were locked earlier than usual. People began to question their safety. Because if it could happen to Quinn, it could happen to anyone. Her husband appeared on local news, visibly shaken. He pleaded for her safe return. His voice cracked as he spoke. Please, if anyone knows anything, just bring her back. It was emotional, convincing, real. Or at least, it seemed that way. Meanwhile, investigators began piecing together her last known movements. She had been seen earlier that day. Nothing unusual. No signs she was in danger. No known enemies. No threats. It made no sense. Which made the case even more disturbing. Days passed. No ransom call. No message. No trace. The case began to grow bigger. State authorities got involved. Search teams were organized. Volunteers joined in. Everyone wanted answers. But the more they searched, the less they found. And slowly, a quiet question began to form in the minds of investigators. What if this wasn't a kidnapping at all? The search for Quinn Hanna Gray quickly turned into a full-scale operation. By day 2, it was no longer just a missing person case. It was a potential abduction. And that changed everything. Search teams moved through nearby woods, empty lots, and surrounding streets. Volunteers formed lines, scanning every inch of land. Helicopters hovered overhead. Dogs were brought in. Every second mattered. Because in cases like this, time is everything. The first 48 hours are critical. And those hours were slipping away. Police began interviewing everyone close to Quinn. Family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers. They needed to understand her life. Was she happy? Was she stressed? Was there anything hidden beneath the surface? At first, everything pointed to a normal life. She was described as a loving mother, a supportive wife, someone who didn't attract trouble. But as investigators dug deeper, small details started to stand out. Nothing big, just inconsistencies. Her timeline that day wasn't perfectly clear. Some of her movements didn't fully add up. And then, there was the car. Investigators returned to it again and again. Something about it didn't feel like a forced abduction. There were no signs of a struggle. No fingerprints from unknown individuals. No physical evidence suggesting someone had taken her by force. It looked staged. But that was a dangerous assumption. Because if they were wrong, they could miss a real kidnapper. Meanwhile, the media coverage exploded. National attention began to build. Talk shows discussed the case. Experts gave opinions. The public became invested. Everyone wanted Quinn found. And fast. Social media, still growing at the time, began spreading theories. Some believed it was a random kidnapping. Others suspected something more personal. And a few started to question Quinn herself. But those voices were quiet. For now. Her husband continued to appear in interviews, each time more emotional than the last. He described their life together, their family, their love. It was compelling, and it pulled people in. Donations began to come in to support the search. Flyers were printed. Her face was everywhere. A smiling photo of Quinn, now tied to a growing mystery. But behind the scenes, investigators were beginning to shift their focus, because the evidence, or lack of it, was telling a different story. A story that didn't involve a violent crime. A story that suggested something unexpected. Something almost unthinkable. What if Quinn Hanna Gray existed? It wasn't enough. Meanwhile, outside the station, the media still supported him. They saw a grieving husband, a man in pain, and the public believed it. But inside the investigation room, the tone had changed, because detectives weren't just asking one question anymore. They were asking two. Did something happen to Quinn? Is he telling the whole truth? But as the hours passed, another possibility began to grow stronger. What if they were looking at the wrong person entirely? Every case has a moment where everything starts to fall apart. For Quinn Hanna Gray, this was that moment. Investigators laid out the timeline again, from morning to the exact moment her car was found. At first glance it seemed complete, but when they zoomed in, the cracks became clear. There were missing minutes, unexplained movements, and one key issue. The timing didn't make sense. If Quinn had been abducted, It would have happened in a very public area, in daylight, with no witnesses, no noise, no signs of struggle. That alone was unlikely. But then came surveillance footage. Nearby businesses had cameras. Not perfect coverage, but enough to see parts of the area. And when detectives reviewed the footage, they noticed something strange. Quinn's car. It didn't appear suddenly. It arrived. Or deliberately. Not abandoned in panic. Not left during a struggle. Placed there. Carefully. That changed everything. Because it meant one thing. Whoever left that car was in control. And that person could have been Quinn. The investigation shifted instantly. Now, instead of searching for a kidnapper, they were looking for Quinn herself, alive, and possibly hiding. The question was no longer, who took her? Became, why would she do this? Now that investigators believed Quinn may have staged her disappearance, they needed a reason. Because people don't just vanish without a motive. They looked deeper into her life. And this time, they found more. Financial pressure. Not extreme, but growing. Bills that were stacking up. Spending that didn't match the family's income. Something more personal. Reports suggested emotional stress. A feeling of being overwhelmed. Possibly unhappy. But nothing that clearly explained such a drastic action. Until one theory began to stand out. Escape. Not from danger, but from responsibility. From pressure. From life itself. It wasn't proven, but it fit. Because staging a kidnapping would create sympathy, attention, and most importantly, time. Time to disappear. Time to reset. Time to avoid something. But what exactly she was running from still wasn't fully clear. As investigators followed leads, they began checking nearby towns, motels, gas stations, anywhere someone could go unnoticed. And then, they found something. A record. A possible match. A woman checking into a motel, using a different name. But the description matched Quinn. The timing matched. And the location wasn't far. When police reviewed surveillance, there she was, alive, walking normally, carrying her own bag. No fear. No panic. Just moving on. That moment confirmed everything. This wasn't a kidnapping. It was a plan. And now, they knew where to find her. Police moved quickly. They approached the motel carefully. No sirens. No attention. Just quiet movement. Because they didn't know how she would react. They knocked. Silence. The movement inside. The door opened. And there she was. Quinn Hanna Gray. Alive. Unharmed. Looking surprised. But not terrified. Not relieved. Just caught. In that moment, the entire case changed. Back at the station, the tone was very different. No longer a victim. No, she was the focus. Detectives laid out the evidence. The car. The timeline. The motel. They gave her a chance to explain. At first, she hesitated. Then spoke. But the story didn't hold. And she knew it. Because the truth was already clear. Eventually, the pressure became too much. And Quinn admitted it. There was no kidnapping. No attacker. No crime. She had staged everything. Planned it. Executed it. And disappeared. What? To escape. To create space. To deal with things she didn't want to face. But in doing so, she created a massive investigation. Fear across a community. And a story that fooled everyone. 4 days. When the truth came out, people were stunned. The story that once created fear, now created anger. Because resources had been used. Time, money, energy. All for something that wasn't real. The media flipped overnight. From sympathy to outrage. There were legal consequences. Filing a false report. Wasting police resources. Creating public panic. Charges followed. And while not the most severe crime, the impact was real. Because trust had been broken. Cases like this raise deeper questions. Why would someone go this far? Experts often point to pressure, emotional stress, the need to escape. But every case is different. And sometimes, the real reason is something only that person fully understands. Years later, the story is back. A new documentary, new attention, new questions. Because people are fascinated by stories like this. Not just because of what happened, but because of what it says about human behavior, trust, fear, and how easily a story can become something bigger than the truth. And in the end, The Quinn Hanna Gray case reminds us of one thing. Sometimes, the most shocking mysteries aren't crimes at all. They're choices.